Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
Each episode, our special guest will bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our special guest is Keola Racela, the writer-director of numerous short films. His debut feature film, Porno, was picked up by Fangoria and will have its release on VOD on May 8th. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're
Yay.
here.
Yay.
And we've all been kind of surviving the quarantine.
Yeah.
Sure have.
Yeah.
So, before we talk about Porno, which is a movie everyone should see, how did you get into the horror genre? Like, have you always been a fan, or is it a new thing? Like, tell us about your horror journey.
Yeah, well, I think for the most part, I was not a huge fan of horror growing up, due in large part to this film we're about to talk about. And so I was just terrified of horror films. It was, I grew up a lot in video rental places, and I would, just avoid the aisle, like my life depended on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, there was one video store we used to go to that had a poster for that film Ghoulies. I don't know if you remember the.
We talked about that.
We talked about Ghoulies.
It was right at the entrance, so I was not able to avoid looking at it. And the poster has this monster that's like peeking out of the toilet. And I was like, is nothing sacred? I mean, not even the toilet is safe. This is insane.
They'll get you in the end.
Exactly. So yeah, I stayed away from them for the most part, but movies were such a huge part of my life that it wasn't until I was kind of like in my middle teenage years that I really started to kind of like get into horror films. I mean, maybe for some people like that's a normal time, but I've been watching movies, just a kind of like crazy consumer of films for so long. It felt like a long time to avoid something. And it was actually through horror comedies that I started to really get into it. So it's kind of fitting that we made this film. But yeah,
absolutely. So, on the other side of things, have you always wanted to be involved in the film industry, or how did you get that bug?
Yeah. So, like I said, film is always a huge part of my life. And, I went to undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, and they had a very small production track. I tried to do one class, and I was just shamed out of it by my other classmates. And so I did not. Yeah. we had to do this exercise, and I was chosen as the editor, and so I had no idea what I was doing, and I cut this film that we were supposed to be working on to a Belle and Sebastian song, and everybody's like, what?
Hell yeah.
I feel like the professor, maybe reacting to how harshly my classmates were treating me, was like, no, this is pretty good. But I was just like, okay, so making movies is not for me. And so I did film studies instead. So, like academic readings and, watching of films. And through that, I was able to see so many, amazing films. But I really felt like, well, no one's going to like give me permission to make a film because obviously I'm bad at it. And so, yeah, it's just stayed that way for a while. But I got a film studies degree, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I was kicking around for a while after I graduated. And every summer I would teach this at the summer program, which is like a college preparatory program for high school kids, and they let me teach a film class. And it was like a film studies class, like a film appreciation class. So we would watch films and talk about them. And then one year they let me teach a film making class, and I had no idea what I was doing, but we all kind of just like dug in. And I was like, oh man, this is really fun. And one of the other teachers there was like, I think you're a filmmaker. Like, you should make films. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And so I did not do that. But then I got, but then I got a job. I moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and got this job, because I'd been teaching at this nonprofit, teaching documentary filmmaking to kids who had either been kicked out of school or had been through the juvenile justice system.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was like a very transformative thing for me personally. And so, that program was all about empowering young people to use their voice. And so what we would do is we would get them together and then plan out these documentary films, these short documentary films, basically around the subjects or topics that led them to be either kicked out of school or to be incarcerated. We would make a film, and then they would do organizing campaigns around those films. And so, and none of these kids had any sort of inclination for filmmaking or thought it was at all possible or an avenue. And so, yeah, it was just about me, basically being like, no, anybody can do this. You just pick up a camera and you can make a film. And so it kind of in empowering those kids, I kind of was like,
you found yourself?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I can do this too. And so I worked there for 4 years. And then I applied to film school, and that was kind of it.
Wow.
Cool. Wow. What a cool journey.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then I went to film school at Columbia. It was a grad school, and that's where I met basically the core team behind Porno.
Yeah. So can you tell our listeners a little about Porno?
Sure.
Explain Porno.
So basically it's a horror comedy about a group of kids who grew up in a Christian community that basically plays G or PG films. And one night they discover a film reel in the basement of their theater. They decide to watch it, and unleashes a succubus which torments them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing premise.
It's such a good premise. It's wild. So how did the film come together? You talked about meeting people in grad school. So but how did Porno itself come together?
So it's kind of it's not a really typical, it's not really a typical story. So what happened was after grad school, I was doing a lot of freelance work and kind of working on this screenplay, which I was like, this is definitely going to be my first feature. And I was very excited about it. But, juggling working and writing, is always difficult. And so I had I had amassed kind of enough money to go stop freelancing and just really drill down on the writing. I'd done these 2 infomercials for baking pans, which weirdly paid very well. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to finish this thing. And basically right after I finished, I got a call from Matt and Lawrence, who are the writers of the film, and Chris Cole, who is the producer. And they were like, do you want to make a movie? And I was like, yes. And and I said, what's the movie? They're like, we don't know. It's a horror movie. And I was like, great. What's the story? And they're like, we don't know. But
we're going to do it.
But there is a person willing to give us a very small amount of money to make a horror film. Do you want to direct it? And I said, absolutely. So
yeah.
So, basically I hung up the phone. I booked a plane ticket. I was living in New York at the time. And they were working in LA as a writing team. And I flew out. And it was a kind of thing where we were like, it had to be made, like the stipulation was it had to be made in a certain amount of time. And we were always kind of worried that, this kind of, I was like, is this real? And they were like, if we work fast, it's real. Like, if we can do it, if we can shoot it before this person changes their mind, then we can make it real. So I was like, great. So I flew to LA. We stayed at an Airbnb for a week, and outlined the film. And then they wrote the first draft of the script in 4 days.
Holy shit.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so basically that was like July, August. And then we shot it in October, November.
How long of a shooting schedule was it?
It was 22 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were just kind of running the whole time. And my attitude was kind of like, I think a lot of people, especially coming out of film school, where you're like, now I will make my grand statement or whatever about like who I am as a filmmaker. I think that anybody who's a creative person is always, trying to do something like that. I think I treat it more as like kind of like punk rock kind of thing, where you're just like, it's a very like DIY kind of like, let's just do this and make it awesome. And that's kind of how it came about.
Cool.
So kind of speaking about kind of the punk rock and roll type, just go and get it done. What I really enjoyed about Porno is the actual porno inside of it, because instead of being just like a typical porno, it felt like, I don't know if this is true, but it felt like it was kind of influenced by like Kenneth Anger and a lot of the avant-garde filmmakers of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of like baked into the idea of the script, which is like, Kenneth Anger is like the number one influence. We watched, what's it called?
Incantation of My Demon Brother or Lucifer Rising or
was it this?
Scorpio Rising?
Scorpio Rising, not Scorpio, but yeah, the Invocation of My Demon Brother, and the other one is, oh man, I have to look this up. This is so annoying. But yeah, so definitely Kenneth Anger, who is himself like a Satanist,
right.
and a queer filmmaker. And, we're just kind of thinking about like, okay, so the idea is this is a haunted porno theater, right? But like, what is the thing that they would mistake? Like the film that they watch inside, of Porno is, basically it's like a demonic film. And so we're like, what is the kind of film that they would watch and think like it's like that it was a porno and not like a demon summoning film? And Kenneth Anger was like top of the list. So yeah, I mean that was definitely like our inspiration from the beginning.
Yeah, I actually was rewatching some of Kenneth Anger's films because it had been a while since I saw him, and I was like, man, I definitely am seeing like Incantation of My Demon Brother in this, and like, there's such if listeners, if you haven't watched any of them, they're actually up on YouTube, a lot of them.
Oh yeah, and the other one, I'm sorry, the other one is Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, which I was going to say, which is the main one, but also Invocation of My Demon Brother. But yeah, you can watch them in their entirety on YouTube.
Which is surprising.
Yeah. It's amazing.
The thing I actually really enjoyed about this is that like, so like I grew up in 1981. So like it was, when I was in my like young teenage years, porn wasn't as like readily available. And so like, I remember like my first memories of porn were actually stumbling upon it in like the woods. Like,
yes.
It was like,
why does everybody have a story about finding it in the woods? It's so true.
Titties in the woods, man. Like, that's how you find it. It's always like a creepy cabin or some shit, like some rundown shed.
Or like hidden in a tree, like some sort of tree stump or something. You're like,
yeah. It just, or like, I would just find like torn out pages, like it was torn pages of Playboy or Hustler. And so like, in my mind, that was like how I associate what porn was. And it's amazing. I think it's really funny to me to think that this very repressed, group of Christian kids, the first introduction to porn is this weird satanic avant-garde demon stuff. And I think that's really hilarious. Like, talk about how that would, like, the people that survive, how that's going to, like, paint your idea of what porn is in the future.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
I know, geez. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely, like, Finding in the Woods, scrambled cable. We would go over to, like adult channels would be on the TV, but it would be, like, scrambled. So you would, like, go to your friend's house late at night and you would, like, watch this, like, fuzzy channel. And like just looking for some sort of like recognizable human appendage, you know what I mean?
I see a breast. I see a breast.
Yeah. I think I saw something.
And we can like, I don't want to like spoil anything, so like we can cut this bit, but I also wanted to ask you about Ricky.
Yes.
On the second rewatch, like, cause I watched this last year for festivals, and then I rewatched again for this podcast, and he felt like kind of the main character to me this time. Like, our entry point is obviously chastity, but like this entire film seems to be about him accepting his sexuality, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the theme of repression is maybe the biggest theme in the film, and him kind of like coming to terms with his sexuality and the kind of like transgression that Chaz does to like really harm him, but because she cares for him so much, and kind of like overcoming that. Yeah, it's like I think the kind of the heart of the film, the secret heart of the film.
Yeah. And Glenn
absolutely.
Stott's performance is fantastic, by the way.
Oh, he's wonderful. I mean, what's crazy is when we were casting the film, we definitely had a very like big. I think the idea is that he was like a bigger meathead kind of guy. But when he came in, I was just kind of like moved by his audition. I was like, this is the guy. You just get that feeling when you're casting where you're like, this is the person. So yeah, he kind of just from the start was Ricky.
He's very charismatic. I caught that a lot more this watch. He's just the camera loves him. I mean, but your entire cast is absolutely fantastic.
They're so funny. They're so good. The chemistry, what was it like filming with them? Like, what was the chemistry like on set?
Oh my God, they were so cute. I, of course, was like a mess because I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? This is crazy. We don't have any money to shoot any of this stuff. But they were just kind of like in love with each other, and like they would just like hang out in our like little crafty like cafeteria area, and just they were so sweet with each other, and immediately had a kind of like camaraderie that I think truly like comes through in the film. So I feel like super lucky as a director. Like they were all super pro and and amazing to work with, but like you just kind of get lucky that they have this kind of like ensemble chemistry, and they were great on set, and when they weren't filming, they were just kind of like winding each other up, and they were So Evan and Larry, who played Todd and Abe, everybody was like kind of like creating these backstories, and Evan and Larry were just like, Todd and Abe in the sequel will end up together as a couple, I think. And
they have a very like that kind of like playful relationship for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a take where there's like a Todd and Abe scene, and then Evan, who plays Abe, just leans over and kisses Todd at the end.
Oh my God.
I was like,
That's
man, I wish this could be in the film. It's so cute. But yeah, it was. They were all just so wonderful and so game.
It's awesome.
So you've also talked about like a quick shoot, and you also talk about the low budget. So how did you get the gore? Because let me tell you, there is, I'm not going to spoil, but there is one particular gore gag that every time I watch it ties me up in painful knots. How did you get this on such a low budget? Because it looks fucking fantastic.
this is all I feel like we were coasting on a lot of luck. So a friend of mine shot his thesis film, and in the film, this woman like cuts her own stomach open and like digs around with a pair of tweezers and stuff. And it's pretty gross. But he found this guy who was not yet 21. I only remember that because we had to buy him beer when we were on location.
Oh my God.
Which I know is not legal, but
we've all done that. We've all done it before.
Well, he was part of the crew, but he was so professional, and the effects that he was making were so good. And I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of like getting started in this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, every person on this set is racking their brain trying to figure out what they can write so they can use you because you are so good. And he was amazing. And so that was like a couple years before we shot this film. So when it came time to shoot the film, I was like, man, can we track down this guy? And, because of the network of film students, we found him, and he had just started a little effects studio with his friend. And
cool.
Yeah. And so we went out there. They're both still mega young. They're just like in their early 20s. And we went to their studio, which they were just setting up. And they were like, come over here and take a look at this. And on this table was this like exploded like human leg. And it was so realistic. I was just like, what the hell? And they're like, we did this for Sicario too. And I was like, you guys did Sicario too? This is insane.
Oh my God.
What? And they were like,
wow.
No, we just did the leg. And I was like,
we just
sold.
did the leg.
Yeah, exactly. But it was amazing. And so I was just like, perfect. It's a kind of thing, especially when everybody's getting started out, you kind of want to find people who are at the same level as you are. And so they were right there. And it was just kind of like, again, a kind of brilliant luck that we found them. They were amazing. They were amazing to work with.
It makes me so happy because like, I feel in this time of computer graphics and CGI that special effects are like practical special effects are becoming a lost art. So it's kind of cool to me that these young in their 20s are making a special effects studio and making like these amazing practical effects. I think that's really cool. I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, especially through the like, I don't know, for the first like decade and a half of the 2000s, there was so much of a shift to CGI stuff. It really feels like people are swinging all the way back around I
hope so.
A great way. So yeah, I mean, we didn't have a lot, even though they were just starting out, we still didn't have a ton of money. So we kind of had to like pick and choose what we wanted them to do. And so, we had them really drill down on the effects we did have them do. And, they did an amazing job.
They really did. Do we want to talk about what we've been watching lately?
Sure.
So Terry, what have you been watching?
So I today watched Butt Boy.
Okay. How was it?
What is Butt Boy?
It is a movie that's coming out sometime in April, and it is about this married IT engineer who is living in like kind of a soulless existence, married to a wife who doesn't really like him, in a job that's like kind of like the corporate machine. And he goes in for his first routine prostate exam, and it opens up this world of having a rectal kink. But then he finds out that somehow his ass will like devour things, and he kind of becomes a serial killer of sorts.
With his ass?
Well, like,
how do I watch this movie?
Is it like teeth with your butthole?
Well, he gets this like obsession of shoving things up his butt, and
it's like swallow with your butthole.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Swallow, because there is a shot in this movie that is like shot for shot the same as the thumbtack in Swallow.
Oh,
except
my God.
it's with a little, like, I think it's the Sorry characters from the board game.
Yeah.
He's holding that up in front of the camera, and like it is shot for shot like the Swallow thing, and I was like, oh, this is like Swallow, except that, like, so he like a serial killer does, he starts off small and then all of a sudden their dog disappears.
Oh, wow.
Because it got shoved up his butt, and then a kid disappears, and that's where I'm starting to go like, okay, this is a little awkward. And then it cuts to 9 years later, and this hard-boiled detective shows up at a AA meeting that this guy is going to, and the guy's name's Chip, the guy that with the butt boy, and he like
yes, the titular butt boy.
The titular butt boy. He ends up becoming the sponsor for the detective, and the detective starts to piece together what happened 9 years ago. And it's like it's actually like most of the film is a very slow burn, like almost detective noir type thing, where he's like he looks like he's channeling Robert De Niro, the detective, and he's like an alcoholic. His wife left him, and like he's struggling with that, and he is hunting down Chip because he gets this idea that Chip is shoving things up his butt, and it's played very straight for like most of the movie, and then it goes completely off the rails. It was a wild watch.
Did you like it?
Yes, I kind of wish it had leaned more into the silliness of it, because it takes itself deadly seriously through like most of the runtime.
I'm so sorry, but how do you take a movie seriously that's called fucking Butt Boy?
Right. So like there's this dichotomy. There's this dichotomy between what the movie is like presenting you and what 90% of the movie is. Like it is basically he's a serial killer who can't help himself. Instead of being like an alcoholic, he's obsessed with shoving things up his butt. And for 9 years he'd been okay, and then something like triggers him to start doing it again. And like it's like a serial killer movie. It's like trying to frame itself as like a 90s Fincher or something. You know, it's very drenched in neo noir neon and
wow. I feel like the marketing department like had a miscommunication or some shit. Like because that name, I'm just like, it's gonna be just like campy, hilarious ridiculousness. But now I'm even more interested, which maybe is good. Because I was like, I mean, I got an email about it, and I was like, I don't know. That just seems like too much. But maybe it's not too much. Maybe it's enough. Just enough.
I was afraid it was going to be a little homophobic. But like...
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it like... Does it lead into that at all?
No, not really.
Oh.
I mean, obviously, it's about a married man that's shoving things up his butt. But... Sorry, car coming by. But yeah, no, it definitely doesn't lead into that, which I was happy to see. It's just
okay.
It's a wild movie that I just didn't know if I should be laughing at or taking seriously through like most of it. And then it has a wild third act. Like
the trend with you recently, huh?
What's that?
Trend with you recently,
huh?
Oh,
yes. It's wild. I mean, I think for the third act alone, it's worth price of admission. It's very... Is
it out yet?
Very weird. No, it was supposed to come out in theaters, I think next week or so. And, now it's coming out on VOD sometime in the middle of April.
Okay.
Do you feel like neo-noir is like having a big resurgence? I feel like there are a lot of, just having gone to some festivals, it feels like there's like a kind of big crop of new kind of indie neo-noir films.
Yes, yeah. I do think so. I think we're seeing it across the spectrum. Like, I think a lot of it has to do with the color pattern. All of a sudden, like the neon and the interchange between like reds and purples and stuff is like becoming a big thing. And right. I definitely think people are leaning into it for sure. I've seen a lot of movies that are being called neo-noir recently, it seems like.
And it also feels like there's a lot of neo-noirs focusing on female characters in the middle, like Blood on Her Name and A Good Woman Is Hard to Find are two that I think of, like when I'm thinking about like the new neo-noirs. And it's been really interesting to see how, like, I know, like, noir is usually so focused on, like, that detective and the femme fatale. And now, especially, like, with the past couple of years, it feels like that narrative is being rewritten a little bit, which I think is really interesting and really important and really cool.
Yeah, I think it's kind of exciting. I don't know. It's one of my favorite genres. So, more noir.
Yeah, I think what hopped out to me recently was even like Cold Hell. Have you guys seen that?
I have not, actually.
It's on Shudder. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah. It's like, what country is it made in?
I think
is it a U.S. film?
It's Germany?
German, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it's German.
It's German.
But like that's like kind of going back with like the female focused neo-noir that's going on like that. She's kind of like a femme fatale, but it's from her perspective is like
cool.
Kind of like mixing the kind of like investigative aspect with like a kick-ass heroine that's like not gonna take no for an answer.
Hell yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Let's check that out.
Yeah. But other than that and playing a shit ton of Animal Crossing, that's all I've been pretty much up to.
Yes, Animal Crossing.
I love it so much. What about you, Mary Beth?
So I watched a really good animated horror movie that is out now on VOD called To Your Last Death. It is it is in the style of Archer meets Metalocalypse in terms of like a 2D animation that looks like it's from it just like jumped right out of the comic book page. And it features the voices of Bill Moseley and Ray Wise and William Shatner. And it's just like this crazy, like when I actually got to interview the director and he called it Saw meets Groundhog Day. And basically it's just like this father who is wealthy and runs a weapons, he's like a weapons dealer basically. He calls his children to his massive building to read his will. And instead of giving them inheritance, he doles out punishment to them for all the things they've done to him. And each punishment is like is something from Saw. Like there's this horrible thing where it cuts into one of his daughter's flesh and like she bleeds out. And like she has to weigh out a certain amount of blood. And if she doesn't, she gets her head cut off. Like it's so weird, but it's also this element of like, there's someone called the Game Master who basically is like Game Master for the gods. And they rewind it because it's not entertaining enough. Like the game is not entertaining enough. So it's like part serial killer weird dad thing and then also like other deities coming in and turning back time to be more entertained. And it's really, really interesting and it's really good and the animation is really cool and I love animated horror. I don't think there's enough of it. So that's out on VOD right now. I really, really recommend that one. And then
I meant to watch that before we recorded this and I just didn't have a chance
I get it. And then I watched The Room on Shudder yesterday.
Oh, yes, you did.
Keola, have you seen The Room?
I have heard a lot of people talking about this movie. It's one I haven't dug into yet, but let's see. What is it about?
So basically, this couple moves to this giant old house in upstate New York, and they're cleaning the house, and they find this room that is hidden behind wallpaper, so obviously something weird's about to go down. And they open the door, and this room will grant them any wish, like anything they want. And as you do in these kinds of movies, it obviously goes
wrong. It's like Harry
Potter. With a lot of booze and a lot of weird shit. But basically, they go crazy for a while and we quit our jobs, we have all the money in the world, blah, 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 blah. And then they make a wish that is pretty intense. And it just all goes downhill from that one wish. And it's just the pacing is weird. The story is weird. Everything about it is weird. And I really don't like the message about miscarriage. It's really strange about birth and miscarriage and stuff. So if you want to spend an hour and 40 minutes watching something absolutely batshit, go for it. But I don't think it's worth the time.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's not the payoff is not worth the time put into seeing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It goes into some very weird places, which I kind of dug in the third act, but I don't feel like it was set up enough with the characters in the beginning to really have much of a payout outside of it being like, hey, look, this is kind of edgy and weird.
Yeah, it was basically like someone wanted to be as weird as they could possibly get without like actually having any idea how it all made sense, like as a narrative.
Yeah, wasn't my cup of tea either. I saw it at Panic Fest, and I was going into it really excited. It's something.
It's a movie.
It is.
But Keola, what have you been watching?
Like Terry, I have been playing Animal Crossing. My girlfriend's in New Jersey right now.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So she bought a Nintendo Switch and Animal Crossing so that we could like play Animal Crossing together. So it's been very cute and a real kind of like relief. I recently watched this movie called Road Games. Have you guys seen this movie? It's from 1981. It's amazing. It's kind of like a serial killer movie. It stars Stacy Keach as like this American truck driver in Australia. He travels around with a dingo, and
as you do, right?
He has to deliver this like truckload of meat. And while he's on the road, there's this like serial killer that's operating, who's like picking up hitchhikers. And he encounters Jamie Lee Curtis, and they try and figure out like who this guy is, and if they can stop him from killing people. It's amazing. It's really, really good. It combines a kind of like suspense and stuff like that with just the corniest comedy, like almost like, I don't know, like very kind of like cheesy comedy. It's like, but it's so good. It's excellent. So I rented that on Amazon. You guys should check that out. It's super worth it.
I'm really liking the poster art. It's very evocative.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this one out.
Yes. So we've talked about what we've been watching now, but let's talk about the movie that you brought with you today, Keola.
Yeah.
What are we talking about tonight?
So we're talking about the 1986 film House, which is a film that I watched when I was very young, and rewatching it, I was like, I don't remember any of this stuff. There's like very specific, there are very specific things, like images or scenes that I remember, but like, man, there's a lot going on in this movie.
This is a house where no one should live.
Woman lived here before you was nuts. Wouldn't be surprised if someone just got fed up and offered her.
She was my aunt.
Heart of gold, though.
Roger Cobb has come here alone.
Daddy?
But no one is ever alone in the house.
This house knows everything about you. Leave while you can.
No!
It has been waiting for him.
Hi.
Sandy.
Now, it wants you. Horror has found a new home. House. Enter at your own risk.
So to catch our listeners up in case you haven't seen it or it's been a while, like it was for me, House is about Roger Cobb, played by William Catt, who is a Vietnam vet whose career as a horror novelist has taken a turn for the worse when his son Jimmy mysteriously disappears while visiting his aunt's house. Roger's search for Jimmy destroys his marriage and seems to be on the verge of destroying his writing career, but the sudden death of his aunt brings Roger back to the house where his nightmares began, and in order to save himself, he must confront his past. So, like you said, there's a lot of things that you don't remember, but take us back to when you were a kid. What was it about this movie that got you, and what was like the story around you watching this?
I grew up with 3 sisters, and if I checked with with my sister, but I do believe it was at a sleepover at her friend's house. Her friend's name's Jessica Thorfinson. Jessica, if you're out there, you really messed me up. And they put this movie on, and I would just, this was the first horror movie I'd ever seen, and
this was the first.
It was the very first, and would be, I think, maybe for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I did not watch a horror movie in between. A lot of the things that are going on in the story, I just went over my head or just do not recall. The Vietnam stuff, I just was like very surprised to find in this film. But the thing that kind of like stuck with me the most is the main character's friend, who's like stalking him through the house at the end. Yes. I remembered very distinctly, I would have these crazy nightmares where this kind of like zombified Vietnam soldier was chasing me through a house. And it was a
Keola. That could be from anything.
I don't think I remember the I know, but I do. It is kind of weird that it was Vietnam, though. I mean, I don't remember that he was a Vietnam soldier, but I do distinctly remember exactly what he looked like, and I would just wake up screaming.
Wow.
It was so bad that I had to go. I would wake up and then immediately go into my parents' room and crawl into their bed because I was so freaked out. And yeah, that's why I didn't watch horror movies for a very, very long time.
So do you remember exactly, was it really just Big Ben, or were there other scenes that kind of like stuck out to you? Because I remember very vivid memories of this movie, watching it as a kid. So I'm just kind of curious.
The only other I remember the wife demon lady. I remember that very distinctly. And being horrified by that. And also, weirdly, the scene where he opens the door and it's on a cliffside.
Yes.
And he, falls out. That I remembered being weirdly terrified of that. I am super afraid of heights. And so, those were the kind of, things that I were just kind of, brought me all the way back when I watched it again.
I have a feeling that if you were a kid horror fan in the 80s, there's probably a good chance that this was a movie that you remember watching, because it feels inviting enough for kids, because there's a lot of giant kind of puppets, and it's rated R, but it doesn't feel like a rated R movie. I don't think there's much in the way of swearing, and there's really no blood. But I forgot, you completely forgot about the Vietnam subtext of this film, or not even subtext. It's basically text. I remember Big Ben, and I didn't quite understand why he's in an army outfit, chasing him. And I remember the evil witch, who, looking back on it, kind of sounds like Zelda Rubinstein sucking on helium.
Oh my God. You're so right. Phenomenal.
But I remember the Marlin. I remember the Marlin because for some reason,
that was very Evil Dead to me.
This whole movie felt
I feel like the whole thing feels Evil Dead. All the creature design stuff, big Evil Dead vibes. Also, Poltergeist. Yeah. I was watching this. I was like, oh, this movie is Poltergeist.
Yes, I was thinking that. It was especially the way the house is I know it's not the same house, but the house made me think about Poltergeist a little bit.
And the way he dives through the thing, and then he dives through the mirror and comes out of the swimming pool with his kid. I was just like, this is Poltergeist. But yeah. I mean, the thing is, this film is co-written by the guy who did Monster Squad, which is a film I did love as a kid, and it has that kind this is pretty much a comedy. The neighbor's played by George Wendt,
who I could not remember his name in the movie, so I just kept calling him Norman in my notes. Norm.
Exactly.
Which fit really well because I kept calling him nosy neighbor Norm, because that's all I can remember. Because he's that nosy older woman that you see in horror movies a lot. That's watching the house with a hawk, but he desperately wants to be in this movie. He just keeps tagging along with everyone.
I know.
From the very beginning, he's like, "Ooh, what are you doing? You want to come over for dinner? Bring your whole family. Oh, it's just you? Come over. We'll just be dudes together." It's guy, why are you so alone?
What's going on over here?
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
But, so the neighbors themselves, like, okay, so we have Tanya, who I'm pretty sure was dubbed over. Like, there, at least in the version I watched, there is some bad ADR going on. It reminded me of like watching an Italian horror movie from that time period. But like, she's introduced coming out of his like swimming pool. Like, is this what neighbors do? I've never lived next to a neighbor that had swimming pools, but is this what people do? They just sort of get in people's pools?
I guess in the 80s.
I don't. Yeah, I think he first sees her jogging by.
Oh, I forgot about that.
He's wearing. I don't know if you. I deeply recall this from watching it this time because he's wearing the deepest V-neck sweater with no shirt on underneath.
Yep.
I was like, this is such a choice.
That and his perm.
Yeah, I mean this character is so weird. It's like he sees her jogging by. They have like a moment, I guess. I think she's maybe taken with his perm or whatever. And then she's just swimming in his aunt's pool. And then she comes back again so he can...
Okay, that was fucking wild. So I was strange. Like, who does this? Who does this?
It's so like, strange.
Recap, though. So she shows up to this guy's house that she's only met once, who had the cops called on him just a bit ago for discharging a shotgun, is acting completely bonkers while she's there. And sure, let's just leave my kid with him.
Where is she going? That she's leaving her kid with this guy?
Like, you look like you want to play. And I'm like, ooh. And it was like, with my child. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I was like, this is annoying.
And then she full on kisses him on the mouth. Like, she's like, thank you, you're so nice. And then kisses him on the mouth. I'm like, what? Who are you?
That's how they do it in her country, I think. Which may be Iceland. I'm not sure where this actress is from.
She's from Sweden. I looked it up because I was wondering, because I was curious why she had to be like so severely dubbed. But
yeah, it feels like such a trope to have like a Swedish bathing suit model be in the film. It made me think of Married with Children and how they would always talk about like Swedish bikini girls or something like that. Yes. It was like, this is such a thing. Like, you know, it feels like a very old kind of like, thankfully left in the past archetype, but like it feels like maybe people in 1986 would be like, oh yeah, the like the Swedish bikini neighbor. And you're like, all right, I guess so.
Terry, how old were you when you saw this movie for the first time?
You know, I was trying to think of that, and I don't know. I know I was living in Alaska, so I had to be somewhere between like I would say 6 and 10 maybe. So probably around the same time I saw a bunch of these rated R horror movies that I probably should never have seen. I don't remember, and I've been trying to think if I remember being scared about it. Like I definitely remember I remember certain things like the Big Ben at the very end, and I remember the overweight kind of zombie wife thing that like she just sort of leans up after you know leaning down and leaning up, and it's this other thing.
Yeah.
But like I don't remember if I was scared of this movie or not actually. And you had never seen it before, right, Mary Beth?
No, I hadn't. Yesterday was the first time I've ever seen it, and I really, really liked it, actually. I had seen the poster's iconic. Like, I've known about the poster, but I also got this and Hausu, the Japanese film, mixed up all the time. Very different vibes. Very different vibes. But I got them mixed up all the time because a lot of the time, like, Hausu was translated to house, and I was like, are these the same movie? And I realized they were not. But I just had never seen it. But I mean, I was kind of expecting, like, cheesy. And actually, it's a very interesting look at trauma and the after effects of trauma and PTSD and, like, personification of that. And I was very surprised and very delighted that, like, I feel like trauma and mental health stuff in horror, especially like early, I mean, like 80s, 70s, 90s horror, it's like not always handled the best, but this was a really poignant look at PTSD, and I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, that flew over my head as a child.
As I would expect, because I feel like if I saw this movie as a kid, I'd be like, what the shit is he doing in this jungle? Like, I have no fucking idea what that has to do with anything. I would just be terrified of, like, the monster coming out of the closet. Like, that would have, I guarantee you, if I saw this as a kid, the creepy giant thing coming out of the closet would have scarred me for life. Because I was already terrified of my closet. Like, Boogeyman 100% real. Right. So that would have just, like, driven me to the edge, probably.
It's kind of interesting because I think this director, his first two films were the first two Friday the 13th sequels.
Oh, interesting.
And so he definitely is he's definitely coming from that place of horror. And I feel like a lot of the scares are good. Like, there are some really, like, good scares in the film. So you kind of feel that. But then, you know, halfway through the film, there's like a very weird music cue after he kills the, like, demon.
I was like, what is happening? Why is this playing all of a sudden? What is the song again?
Oh, that's...
it's like You're No Good.
Yes.
It plays again under the credits. And you're just like, what is the tone of this movie? It's so strange.
It is so strange. I was like, is this a comedy or is it scary? It's kind of sad at points, but I'm kind of laughing at some of this stuff, and I'm not really sure what's supposed to be happening, but I'm enjoying it. But it's very weird.
I'll tell you, the part that, like, had me laughing so hard, though, was when he was babysitting Robert, and he's like, want something else to play with? How about a nice plastic bag?
Right? I was like, dude, what the shit? You had a kid. Like, you know how to interact with children.
I thought that was hilarious.
A nice plastic bag.
And why does he not leave the house after seeing the first monster?
You know, that is an excellent question, because, like, he just keeps pretending like nothing's happening, and he's like, I'm just going to go back to writing my book. I don't know.
Do you remember the title? Do you remember the title of his book?
It's like, what was it? Like,
I wrote it down. It's One Man's Story, a personal account of the Vietnam War. It's just like, my friend, this is why nobody wants you to write this. This is your title for your Vietnam story? One Man's Story? I
actually really loved when he's at the book signing and, like, the camera's, like, focused in on all the faces.
Oh, man, so interesting, so funny.
Yeah, like, all these people are just, like, luring over the camera. I thought that was really...
That cut is so great because it's, like, right up into that crazy lady's face, and you're like, whoa!
Yeah, and I also really enjoyed Norm when he's, like, talking about the woman that lived here before you was nuts, biggest bitch under the sun, just a senile old hag, really. She was my aunt.
Right.
Heart of gold, though, just a saint, really.
Then he ends by saying she looked really good for her age. It's like, what?
Like, that's how I want people to talk about my aunt.
Exactly.
I was actually talking I was talking to Terry about this yesterday, and how this movie kind of reminded me a little bit of The Girl on the Third Floor.
Mm-hmm.
Keola, have you seen it?
I have not seen it yet. I have not seen it yet.
It's mostly
it's on my
just
list.
like the design of the house, and how it's like a guy goes into a house alone to, like, fix it up, and then weird stuff starts happening. I mean, like, they're both tonally and, like, thematically pretty different, but they have a very similar vibe in terms of, like, setup and, like, man against ghost that I thought was very interesting. And, like, I feel like that had to have been an inspiration for The Girl on the Third Floor, I think. But yeah.
You know what it reminded me of, and this might be weird, but the 2019 remake of The Grudge. Did you guys watch this movie?
Yes, I saw it recently.
I mean, so in that movie, it's like there's this house that's haunted, and at the end they have to, like, burn down the house to get free of the haunting, and the characters are all plagued by, like, ghosts from the traumas of the past. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, this feels like The Grudge to me.
You know, another movie that, like, came to mind immediately, one of the scenes that I still think is really creepy and, like, a what the fuck was that, was when the two creepy kid monsters steal Robert and pull him into, like, the room. And then, like, they pull him up the chimney. I'm like, this is giving me Krampus vibes of, like, the gingerbread man, like, pulling the kid up, and they're, like, grabbing on his leg and they keep pulling him up the chimney. That's what it was reminding me a lot of.
It's a big what the fuck moment because it feels like figuring out the logic of the monsters of this movie is kind of crazy because you're just like, who are these little demon kids or whatever? And again, he pulls the kid out of the chimney, and instead of like being like, oh, you should not be stolen by monsters that are obviously haunting this house, he just gives him a bath.
It felt like the editing was out of sequence or something. It was just like, wait, all of a sudden they're in the bath and the kid is fine. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I would have been screaming. Like, how is that kid just like, okay, like.
They're very nonchalant about the horrible things that are happening to them.
Like such a weird, like, tonal jump from this horrific thing happening to like, we're just in the bath throwing this sponge at each other. Like, what?
In my mind, I was like, I guess the kid got dirty in the chimney. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess.
I have no idea why he would be like, there are actual monsters.
Well, and I guess something that, like, maybe I am just not viewing the movie correctly. I was a little bit confused that, like, I guess the cause of all of this is Big Ben, the demon ghost of his past. But then, like, what was everything else? Just, like, part of that and just, like, torturing him because of that? Like, minions of this Big Ben figure? Or... But I had the vibe that it was happening before that, though, because his aunt was saying the house was haunted.
Right. I don't think it's the way you're watching the film. I think the film is just super confusing about that. You know, there's a part where you know they have a flashback where the main character's kid goes missing and they're talking to the cops and the aunt's just like, the house took it, and you're like, what?
Cool, yeah, that's exactly it. They're gonna buy that.
And then I guess they never spoke of it again, or they didn't be like, hey, what do you mean the house took the kid? You know what I mean? Like, just, you know, whatever. And she's just like kind of smiling about it.
And then the wife goes, shut up, you old bag. And she goes, someone's sensitive. I was like, really?
Her kids went missing.
That's an interesting reaction to that, I suppose.
So one of the things that I did realize, or that like stuck out to me a lot on this viewing, was I kept staring at these puppets because they reminded me of this movie called The Boneyard. Have you guys ever seen The Boneyard?
No, I have not.
From 1995.
I have not.
It's a movie that utilizes like a bunch of zombie puppets, including like a giant zombie poodle.
Fuck yeah!
It's batshit. It is so much fun. It's a little racist, as the way that they are in like 80s and 90s.
Oh my god!
Mm-hmm.
But like,
listen, the film that this director made right after this is a film called Soul Man, about a guy who does blackface in order to get into college.
He directed that movie? Oh,
it's the film he made right after this movie.
God. I talked about Soul Man in one of my grad school classes and how it was just like a horrifically tone-deaf situation that no one should ever have made.
But I bring up The Boneyard because it turns out that the creature design of this movie is the guy that would go on to direct Boneyard in the 90s.
Oh,
and
cool.
The puppets are the same kind of like whimsical child nightmare type feel to them, and I think it's really cool. I really recommend The Boneyard, even with some of you just got to realize it's a product of its time.
The poodle zombie is truly amazing looking.
Amazing, and the puppetry in it is so much. You can tell that like he was just getting started with this movie with House.
I thought they were really impressive too, the puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
one of the only things that like really imprinted on my mind as a kid.
Yeah.
I just remember the puppetry.
Yeah, I guess I was like, I didn't know much about House before I saw it, and so I didn't realize how much amazing like practical creature stuff was going to be in it. And I was so impressed and just like entranced by like the creepy thing in the closet, and the demon kids, and the zombie wife, like, and the hand that kept coming back. Her creepy, like, long clawed hand. It was, like, attached to the kid's back, and then he bit it off because it wouldn't let go.
He bites it off and then flushes it down the toilet.
I was waiting for it to crawl back up out of the toilet because that would have been great. But also, when he meets the neighbor, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, digging a hole.
A big hole. I can see
my
that.
God.
In a big hole, and you're like, I mean, I guess you're not lying. And she's like, is it a sapling or something? And it's like, that's definitely a sapling. Just that giant body-shaped tarp. It's like, I start talking about this movie seriously and like how much I liked it, and then it goes down into the comedy. It's so funny. I'm like, yeah, this movie was so cool. And then I'm like, and it was ridiculous.
But
yes, that's kind of one of the enjoyable things about it, though.
I would say so.
I do think that we're missing the scariest moment of this movie, though, and that is when, the beginning of the movie, Roger decides it's a smart idea to put a TV dinner in its box in the microwave for 30 fucking minutes.
Holy shit! I just like completely missed that.
He puts it, he just throws it in its box, not even taken out of its box, and he puts 30 fucking minutes on the timer in a microwave.
Oh my God.
You know, technology back then.
Like you do. Yeah, very weak microwaves. We've come a long way.
Very powerful freezers mixed with very weak
must
microwaves.
Have been like a block of ice.
Oh my God. So do we want to talk about our final words on House?
Yeah.
So Terry, how many wriggling marlins out of 5 do we give House? And what are your final thoughts on it now?
You know, when I was a kid, this was probably like a 4 or 5 star movie because of like all the practical effects and the puppetry. I would say it's probably about a 3 or 3.5 now.
Okay.
I do think the puppets are a lot of fun. I think the pacing is a little weird in parts, and I do think that it's kind of overshadowed with what Evil Dead 2 will do in a couple of years after this movie's released.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of fun, and I have a lot of nostalgia to it. What about you, Mary Beth, as someone that didn't have that nostalgia?
I want to give it 3.5 wriggling marlins out of 5. I really enjoyed it way more than I was expecting. I think it is actually a really fascinating examination of PTSD. Mm-hmm. And I really loved the practical effects, and I was much more emotionally invested in it, and kind of made me sad more than I was expecting. So I really appreciated that ability to both be silly but also make me feel very invested in his journey as a character. So
yeah.
All right, Keola, you have the final word. What's your rating, and what are your final thoughts on House?
I mean, I have such a checkered past in this film. I want to say that I think for the general public, especially if you're familiar with these kinds of films, maybe 2.
Oh,
for me, it was a 5.
Okay.
Just because I think it's interesting to think about like where films, especially when you're going back and revisiting older films, where they lie in the kind of like timeline of in the context of other films. And I think you gotta check it out to see the amazing like practical effects and the creature designs and stuff like that. Tonally, it's all over the place. The logic of the film is broken, maybe.
Put it lightly.
But there, there's a moment where you're like, this guy is being haunted by the ghost of his friend because he refused to cut his friend's throat in Vietnam. This is so crazy. Like it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, it's dark. It's really fucking dark.
Like the traumas behind it are so dark.
It's dark, and also
Yes.
It is a little bit. Yeah,
It definitely is.
So you're haunting me because they didn't kill you. All right. Well, thank you so much for Keola for joining us to talk about House. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up you'd like to share?
I mean, I'm on Twitter. I don't really tweet a lot, but I'm just on there. So you can join the like 100 people that follow me, and like the 200 like porn bots that have followed me since our film came to be.
Sounds
By the way, I have to
right.
say,
Where I'm
I have to say thank you, because I have gotten a lot of hits for people searching gay porn that has shown up in my site. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I'll be like, oh, I have a new follower. And then it's like, the user pick is always just like some wildly pornographic image. So feel free to follow me on Twitter, where I will sometimes be like, I don't know, tweeting out YouTube links to songs like
Yes.
What's your handle just your name?
Yeah, it's Keola Racela. Our film comes out on VOD May 8th, and then it'll be on Shudder, I think sometime in September. But definitely it's available to pre-order on iTunes and I think very soon Amazon. So I will tweet out a link to that. And also, if you follow Fangoria, they're
oh my gosh, I love the trailer on Pornhub.
Oh my God.
I love that they did that.
Yes. Have you seen the little graphic they have?
Yes,
your browser
it's
history?
fucking hysterical.
I'm in love with the people at Fangoria. They're so awesome, and they've been nothing but great. So we're super excited to be working with them.
Hell yeah!
So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with House? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. Follow us at Scarred Podcast. You can also follow Terry and I on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And like I said, make sure to follow us on Twitter and keep the conversation going.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe if you like what we're doing.
Please. Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our amazing music. And thank you to everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. And most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children. Somebody please think of the children.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.